Of political pundits and polls, postponements and budgets, there are a plethora of things to speak on. This is The Conversation, and I'm Kwame Thomas. Today we examine these and more with the opposition spokesperson on information, Mr. Raymond Pryce. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, so I've been looking at the media, I've been looking at the news, and I'm just interested to find out what are your views on the recent budget presentation by the finance minister. That's the first thing I'll jump into.
The presentation is, in my view, a continuation of a trend from which he can't depart. The truth of the matter is that in the 2008 to 2010 period was the last time we saw a finance minister going off the rails in terms of the handling of the country's economy. And between 2012 and 2016, then Finance Minister Dr. Peter Phillips, while working with Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller, had to literally dig up the tracks, rebuild the Jamaican economy from the foundation up with a lot of oversight and partnership with the IMF. There were certain laws that were passed in terms of the fiscal discipline legislation, which assures three things. One, that kind of recklessness that we saw in the 2008 to 2010 period never returns. Two, that all of the fiscal and monetary policies were now in keeping with modern standards and globally benchmarked. And three, that all finance ministers going forward will be accountable by law to the proper management of the economy. So there was very little in the presentation by Dr. Nigel Clarke that I found surprising.
Okay. Now, as far as the priorities are concerned, though,
yes.
Do you think those are in line with where the country is supposed to be going? And the bigger question also is what exactly is being communicated by this budget presentation? Well,
our grandparents used to tell us, show me your company, and I tell you who you are. When it comes to our government, show me your budget priorities, and I will tell you the kind of government you are. So in that regard, you ask the question, are the correct priorities the ones that are put forward? What I would call the correct priorities are these: education, health, and national security. If you're developing a country to create a modern, prosperous, and productive society, the members of that society must be well educated. In that regard, I don't think that the allocation to the education ministry for actual education was sufficient. The second one is health. And while there are significant amounts of money being allocated to the health sector, my concern with that is over the last couple of years, the government, the Holness administration, has fallen into a credibility dilemma. The Cornwall Regional Hospital is the best example of that. We were told that it would have been completed in 2 years for $5 billion. Now we're being told it's going to be more like 4 to 5 years. And already the new estimate is well beyond $10 billion. At the same time, we hear in the budget of refurbishing the University Hospital of the West Indies, refurbishing Spanish Town hospitals and other health facilities. And the problem that we have with that is it going to be done like what you're doing with Cornwall Regional Hospital? Missed budgets, missed targets, missed diagnoses, or is it going to be done properly?
So, but what could have been done differently, though? Because I'm looking at it, and since the onset of COVID, we're still looking to recover.
Yes.
The price of pretty much everything has gone up.
Yes.
Could it be argued then that these are some of the reasons why there has been a misstep, rather, in terms of how the amount of money is presented and the cost now and all of those things? Could those not be reasonable assumptions to make?
Those could be reasonable assumptions.
But?
However, the opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Maurice Guy, who is an actual medical doctor, had done a tour of the facility. And interestingly, he said the work that needed to be done would have been closer to 10 billion than 5. And the time to do it would have been closer to 4 years than 2. And this is why there is a credibility gap If today, well, we are recording this on a Thursday, that's just a fact. Wednesday might be my favorite day, Friday might be your favorite day, but today is Thursday. What the administration sought to do was to make it seem as if by the snap of a finger, they could brogadize everything and just do it based on how they said it without a truthful, professional, and proper assessment.
So you're saying that we were misinformed, essentially.
Yes.
What could they have done differently?
Told the truth. It's always a very good place to start. They could have had a thorough investigation in terms of the environmental health requirements for that building. They could have been quicker to respond to the complaints. I don't know if your audience remembers that first you had a series of nurses and other medical staff passing out, complaining that the air quality was poor. The administration was slow to respond to that. And when they finally responded, they attempted to give us the Band-Aid edition as to just how quickly it could have been done. And I believe that we are now seeing the addition in time, which is an expense, as well as the addition in cost. So even the suggestion you made, which is factual, that the inflation would have affected the overall price tag, but then the timeline would have also added along with inflation. And the question that now arises in the minds of people from St. Catherine, from Portmore, from parts of Clarendon, and parts of St. Mary who would go to the Spanish Town Hospital, they're like, well, when they show us this nice diagram and tell us they're going to modernize the Spanish Town Hospital and they're going to do it in X time, is X really X? Or is X like the Cornwall Regional Hospital X?
But I could easily argue, though, that, okay, so Maurice Guy was right. Well, a politician might not say it that way.
Yeah.
So now they have actually paid attention to what he has put forward in terms of time and in terms of cost. And then they're saying, no, we're learning from this, and this will be the actual. So they might be closer to what you're now recommending, because I'm sure then that Maurice Guy would have been looking at these other institutions and he would have been making his own judgments on the time and the money that would have been needed.
Right, and you mentioned the budget debate, so the entire process is a two-part process. So we have what is famously called the budget debate, which is the Minister of Finance, opposition spokesman on finance, leader of the opposition, and then the Prime Minister. And now we're going into the sectoral debate. And what you're going to see in the sectoral debate are individual spokespersons with responsibility for specific portfolios from the PNP will be doing the right adjustments of some of the errors that are still being pursued and presented by the administration. So I can simply say, watch for the Maurice Guy presentation, where an actual medical practitioner who is in actual contact with medical professionals and who understands the actual requirements for the proper management of the health sector will be giving an actual presentation that we can believe in.
So, but I'm thinking though, yes, actual, but factually, generally speaking, we see engineers and construction consultants, they are the ones that would be building.
And so you're correct, but does the politician at the head of the Ministry of Health listen to the subject matter experts? We now see, for example, when we had that outbreak, the bacterial outbreak that led to the death of newborns, the incident happened, there was expert opinion as to what to do to prevent it, and that was not done. And then when Minister Tufton finally admitted to the country that there was this problem, it was after the fact. He then said that he had brought in experts from the Pan American Health Organization or the WHO to review the situation. I can't recall the publication of their findings. Can you?
Not at the moment. Now, you stated two things. Well, you stated that there were three. You gave me two. Right. Health was one. Education was one. What's the third one?
The third one?
National security.
There you go. And where it comes to this administration, what is becoming the symbol of their handling of the national security portfolio is to be seen at a police station built near Green Acres along St. John's Road in Spanish Town. When it rains, that station floods. That station has been completed for the better part, if not more than a year. It's still unopened. And recently, the police station, which should be a symbol of the safety and security of the community, was robbed. The police station was robbed. We have police officers going to the ABM being attacked by gunmen. One inspector, our senior rank police officer, was recently hospitalized attempting to use the ABM somewhere in Spanish Town. We are seeing what happened in Portmore recently, middle of the morning on a Sunday. The kind of scenes we only see on Netflix series and in movies. So if you ask me, is this administration delivering its promise? Not that I don't know who would want to sleep with their windows and doors open, but that's what we were told. I don't remember the direct quote, but basically, if you vote for wholeness and the GLP, you can sleep with your windows and doors open, which was to symbolize to the country that you wouldn't have to worry about crime and criminals.
So what would be a better approach? Had the PNP been in power, what would have been a better approach to handle this?
So our General Secretary, Dr. Dayton Campbell, made a speech at Annual Conference 2022 where he says, we are not the same. What distinguishes the PNP on the matter of national security is we invest in social development, not in social control. If the administration had continued with programs such as Unite for Change, where we got into communities, along with people like those from the Peace Management Initiatives, along with other professionals in terms of guidance and counseling and dispute resolution, to invest in social skills rather than states of emergency, curfews, and ZOSOs, we would by now, 7 years later, have seen not just a reduction, which comes in seasons, but a total control of the behavior that leads to crime and criminality.
So in 7 years, because Jamaica has had an issue with crime for quite some time now. Yeah. So you are proposing that in 7 years, all that would have been different had they continued with the initiatives that your government had put in place.
So math is my first language, right? Mm-hmm. You see, between 2012 and 2016, without ZOSOs, without states of emergency, without purchasing additional armament, with things such as Unite for Change, we saw a reduction in murders. We saw a reduction in serious crimes. Since those programs of social investment were discontinued, we have seen a net increase in serious crime and murder. Sometimes it might dip, or you know the Jamaican expression, dip and fall back. But the trends, which is what you watch over time,
the net increase,
have shown a net increase.
All right, so we go for our first break. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching The Conversation with Kwame Thomas. Welcome back to The Conversation. I'm here speaking with Mr. Raymond Pryce, the Deputy Spokesperson on Information. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
Now, you just stated that maths is your first language. It happens to be something that I'm I wouldn't say passionate yet. I love it. I love the subject. And yes, from what we have discussed, we can say the maths aren't mathsing.
That's correct.
That's the right term to use. Now, in terms of key issues, though, that are currently facing Jamaica today, how do you think, well, firstly, what do you think those key issues are? Are they different from the health, the education, and the national security, or these are they? If they are, what can we do to change them?
So those three, health, education, and national security, are present with us all the time, like oxygen in the air. And then there are different impacts that it causes across society. Now, one of those impacts is that we are not seeing the appropriate investment in the country's human capital. And investment in the country's human capital is more than just remuneration. It's more than increasing the minimum wage. It is how you approach dialogue within the various interest groups across society. The approach to be controlling rather than to be consulting is one of the main issues. So you have a lot of the key architects of a society's success. They're teachers, they're nurses, they're police officers, they're doctors. The level of discomfort, the level of distrust, the level of just a feeling of confusion as to how this administration, the Wholeness Administration, over the long term, expects to really value our civil servants, value the various categories of the labor force, just in terms of how you approach their unions and their representatives. And what that causes, let's stick to education, is that there are teachers, or if you speak to student teachers at our education colleges, MICO, churches, Sam Sharp, any of the teachers' colleges, they are already, as people say on the road, you know what them are pre? The recruiters from London, the recruiters from Canada, the recruiters from the United States, who have placed a real value on the worth of a teacher trained in Jamaica and who are offering them grants to relocate with their entire families.
But in the same token, though, there was a recent protest action.
Yes.
In the UK as well.
Yes.
Teachers also, you had teachers, you had bus drivers. So the situation is not limited or restricted to just Jamaica now. So the question that I might want to ask, could this be something larger than just what this particular government is doing? Could it not be an issue of world trends now? Something is happening globally, and so we're feeling the crunch or the pinch, and so we are protesting for better or for different.
Right. Yeah.
So
no, you're absolutely correct. And therefore, the important thing is that the government of the day understands the needs of the Jamaican citizen and responds to those needs. I'm happy you touch on what is happening globally. Let's look on something such as the ganja sector. This administration, the Wholeness Administration, has taken a decision. Remember I told you earlier, show me your numbers and I tell you what your priorities are. This Wholeness Administration has decided to make ganja farmers in Canada wealthier than they already are by importing ganja from Canada. You are saying to the local small farmers, your business is not as important. So I'm not going to come up with investment plans for you. I'm not going to come up with development plans for you. Let us look on tourism. You see, in Jamaica, every time a government wants to tell the world a sector is important, it puts in certain agencies. So for tourism, we know it's important. There's a tourism product development company. There's a tourism enhancement fund. And there's a Jamaica Tourist Board. With the ganja sector, where is the ganja industry development company? Where is the ganja industry enhancement fund?
So
and on top of all of that, failing to do that, you now decide there's ganja available in Canada. Let me make the Canadians wealthier while making the Jamaican farmers even more poor.
So my question though, would this be an area in which you would be willing to collaborate with the ruling party to achieve that kind of progress for all Jamaicans?
Collaboration is good, you know.
But
you see, if I choose, I'm going to go to that doctor now. I'm going to let that doctor diagnose my ailments. I'm going to pay that doctor for his service. But then I'm going to call another doctor to give me the prescription, to visit me and to make sure that I am recovering. You can only have one government at a time. And while there is a role in the Constitution and in democratic traditions
for a coalition,
for the opposition, we are not a part of a coalition. You have 49 members of parliament who spend all of their constituency development funds without collaborating with PNP caretakers. They pass laws without collaborating with PNP lawmakers. They go out and promote brogadism without collaborating with PNP members. So when they are failing, what they should do, as any failed government does, is take with themselves. We had a local government election that was due the other day now. And what did this Holiness administration do? Them take with themselves, them follow the rhythm and take with themselves. And you know what the rhythm was telling them? The rhythm was telling them what the polls have confirmed. The public, the Jamaican electorate, has seen through them and are now over them.
With that said, no, the recent Dun Anderson polls that your party commissioned is showing a closing gap between the country's two political parties.
Yes.
What are your views on this?
All right, so firstly, polls are like a lesson plan. You learn from them. You don't complain about them. You learn from the pollster. You don't be cantankerous with the pollster. And with respect to the party standings, what it shows is that the Jamaica Labour Party has fallen 4 and the People's National Party has increased by 10. 10 plus 4 is 14. So there's a positive momentum of 14 behind the PNP for 2 reasons. One, the Secretariat and the leadership of the PNP, our spokespersons, our members of parliament, our councillors and mayors have been out there listening to the people and responding within the means that we are able to by law as the opposition party. It also shows that the Jamaican electorate is saying, all right, you did just come back. So we give you the first term. You did have a small majority, so you said that you couldn't do what you wanted to do. COVID come, and by the way, COVID didn't come for Jamaica alone.
Came for the world.
COVID came from the world. So there was no innovation in the Holiness administration to deal with COVID. The entire world was responding the same way and learning at the same time.
But we came out positive, on the positive side. So the question now
is...
The
entire world came out on the positive side.
That's arguable.
Because, you know, the interesting thing about it, the last time there was a global pandemic was 1918.
Yes.
Nobody in leadership anywhere in the world was still alive to do institutional responses to the 2019 COVID pandemic as was done for the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. So unlike many people, I don't really react to the government's performance during COVID the way the government reacts to its performance during COVID.
So, question now, is it a case whereby the PNP, because you spoke about a net gain of 14 points,
yes.
But could it be then that it's not a case whereby the PNP is gaining, but it's just a case whereby the JLP is actually losing?
And it could be both. And in fact, it is both. Because polls are a snapshot in time. And if you're plotting a graph, the last data that we had was September 2022 that showed certain results. The one before that was November 2021.
Yes.
And the one before that was August or March 2021. So we had the September 2022 results, and we now have the March 2023 results. And what those 2 results show is that relative to where the PNP was in 2022, we are 10 points ahead. And relative to where the JLP was, they are 4 points behind.
So, straight up now, do you really think that the PNP is in a position to regain government?
I can answer that in 3 ways. I'm going to reject the first 2 that come to mind. That's simply to say, the Tiger response, where you run for, you know, should I turn up? Because if they be turn up with the local government, we'd have been answering this question by the votes, the actual ballots counted. So I won't go down that road. What I will say is that the PNP knows the kind of work that we have had to do to get to this point, and we know exactly what we still need to do to get to a point that whenever the general elections are called, we would have been able to show to the electorate the honor and privilege of learning through them what they need priorities on, and having showcased our policy proposals, the honor and privilege of them selecting us rather than the Jamaica Labour Party.
So no, I like it that you put it that way, because I'm thinking that with roughly a third of those polled indicating that they would not vote.
Yeah.
The question now is, do you think it's time for what we call mandatory voting?
I'm a Jamaican, I'm a Democrat, and I'm a patriot. When you talk to a Jamaican about mandatory, we sort of have a cultural response.
Yes.
That I don't think is necessary for our democracy. You know what's necessary for our democracy? Inspired leadership that is patient and willing to listen to especially the youth emerging from university and high school, and to respond to their needs, incorporating their approaches and presenting to them a set of workers as parliamentarians who will be working in their interest and their interest alone. That's what increases voter turnout. It doesn't have to be mandatory.
All right, so I'm looking at the data, and you had stated earlier that we all have benefited, or we have all come out on the positive side of the pandemic, but most governments, most incumbents rather, that has gone through the pandemic, they're actually on the back end, they're actually suffering. Mm-hmm. And what comes to mind immediately are two elections throughout CARICOM region, yes. Grenada and Antigua and Barbuda, where one has lost, mm-hmm. and one has lost a few seats, or far fewer now, mm-hmm. or he has won by a smaller majority. Yeah. Could it not be that it's the same thing that's actually plaguing this administration, and it's not that they are as bad as you have painted?
You know what is plaguing this administration and the two that you gave an example of? An inability to respond to the needs of the day in the way the electorate wants. There's another election that happened in the region, Barbados. Why doesn't anybody speak about Barbados? In other words, when a government is doing well for the people vote for that administration. So we talk about Grenada, and we talk about the other example, but we leave Mia alone. She led her country through the same global pandemic. Well, so that's also a good example.
In the normal scheme of things, that's one. You realize that 67% has been on the other end. So we generally wouldn't pay attention to that.
There are other countries in the world that have had elections, and the incumbents that led the country through the pandemic still forms the government.
In terms of majority?
The other one that is interesting is the same party in power, even though they've had a couple of prime ministers in quick succession. I can't even remember a couple of the names. I'm talking about the UK, which mm-hmm. now has its first coloured prime minister. You get what I'm saying? So it's all well and good to choose an example that tells your story the best. But you know the only example that is important to your audience, to the mothers watching? When I went last week with this amount of money, I got more food than this week. And when I go next week, I have even less food. And the week after that. So it's all well and good to speak about the Don Anderson polls, or the Blue Dot polls, or what Raymond thinks, or what the JLP thinks. The poll that is most important is what I call the mother's poll. And when that mother goes to the wholesale or the corner shop, or goes to the supermarket and cannot carry home everything that she knows she needs to carry home, cannot decide to pay for school supplies, pay for transportation, pay for food, and pay for the medication of the elderly relatives, that's the test that this administration is failing at the most.
Last question. 20 seconds.
Yes.
PNP rebranding.
Yes.
Is that necessary?
It's always necessary to evolve. It's always necessary to respond to the needs of the day. A PNP prime minister such as Norman Manley he was premier in the 50s, didn't have to contend with global warming. So we have to always be a learning organization, an organization that incorporates knowledge with experience to respond appropriately. I don't see that as a crime. I see that as exactly what the doctor ordered.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Pryce.
Thank you so much.
Good opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Well done. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The Deputy Spokesperson on Information, Mr. Raymond Pryce. This is The Conversation, and I am Kwame. Welcome back to The Conversation. I am Kwame Thomas, and in this segment, I will be speaking with the President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, Michael Leckie. Welcome to The Conversation.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, the Small Business Association of Jamaica is, at the very least, 400,000 strong in terms of businesses. And I'm thinking of that in terms of the budget, the national budget that was just read.
Yes.
I want to assess the impact. I want you to tell me what the impact that there may be on small businesses in Jamaica. How will those 400,000 plus benefit or be implicated anyway from the budget?
Yeah, based on the budget, I believe that is not adequate. First of all, let us look at that. Because when we checked on what we see that to move the MSME sector is going to require. So far, the finance minister has looked at $13.5 million, but we are looking at between $40 to $50 million in order, billion dollars rather, to really kickstart the sector. Pre-COVID, what we have had about 40% closures, and since then we have been reeling to get all these 40% up and running again. But the problem is when you look at the sector, it's really one that needs more than working capital, and it needs a foundation so we can support all the businesses at the 400,000 as you mentioned.
All right, so are there any specific measures in the budget that you feel will be particularly beneficial or challenging to small businesses?
Yeah, what is required all around the world, we need to pivot. Pivot means we cannot stick to our core businesses. So it has to be now an additional income that needs to be added to small business. I've always said that, and I'm on record to say that what we need now is to diversify. In order to diversify, there's a support in need of the government. What we think at the Small Business Association, that we need to add agriculture as an additional fit to what is happening at MSMEs. When you look at businesses are already geared to the profit and their income and their stocks and so on. So now to pivot into agriculture, what it does is an additional fit into what is happening. Why I said agriculture, when you look at the deficit of our imports, and we are exporting about 400 billion, we are importing about 1.2 billion, so we are a deficit of over 600. So this is where we want to close the gap by adding agriculture as a way of getting the sector going.
So you spoke about agriculture, you spoke about diversification.
Yes.
There is this segment that falls in agriculture, but it's not mainstream. I'm talking about the marijuana business.
Yes.
Would it make sense or would it not make sense to have that as a part of the primary contributors to the MSME and its growth in terms of diversifying?
I think it would, but there are too many regulations that are holding down that industry. So what I would do, I will look at what I call low-hanging fruits. not to sidetrack or put on on pause where the marijuana persons are. Don't forget now. So we're looking at coffee, cocoa, we're looking at sugar cane, and all of the niche products that I think it is needed to actually to boost the small businesses.
Why I asked you though, and I'm happy that you said low-hanging fruits, because I'm thinking though that outside of just boosting your morale, yes, I don't see the real purpose that these low-hanging fruits don't necessarily spell long-term gains. But we're looking at the fact now that Jamaica seems as though we might be importing from Canada in terms of marijuana. Yes. Why not lobby, use this 400,000 businesses, not business owners, but businesses, right, so it might be very well be more, and see if you can lobby the government to at least lend an ear to your plight and incorporate this in the list.
Okay. The Prime Minister has shown disgust, I'm going to put it like that, so, because he says, listen, I hear the cries out there, and he's looking directly at the Minister of Investment, Industry and Commerce and says, fix it. And that is a good start. So for me, I believe that the marijuana industry will take a hint from what the Prime Minister is saying and know that it will be fixed. But why I disagree with you is that these low-hanging fruits are already established. And it's difficult now to put all of the infrastructure in the other farming belt. It's difficult to do that. What you're looking at, we already have the cocoa farmers, we already the coffee farmers, we have all of these farmers. Is to just support them and push up. Because what you want, is two things. You want foreign exchange, and what you want is employment, which are the two major things. And then what you do, you boost the consumption, and which is the driver for GDP.
All right. So as far as the budget is concerned, yes, we understand that we have all been affected some way, shape, or form, yes, by COVID-19 pandemic. How does the budget address the needs and concerns, in your estimation, of small businesses in light of this pandemic?
The budget is a bit inadequate, as I said early on, because I think we need being $40 to $50 billion boost. So I have talked to the finance minister and said, listen, this is what the actual needs are. But it's a start, and I must say that because I know how tight it is, or the budget is. So with this, there are a number. I have DBJ, that where the government actually funneled all the finances through. So what is happening, what DBJ now is going to concentrate on those, what you call it, startups, and those are existing businesses, and those that are new innovation, which is good, because what happened, you have brought in, especially the younger and the new entrants into businesses. What you are doing now is to boost them and cause them now to look at the government push to actually use the DBJ as a vehicle for them, because it is not all loan, but most of it is grant, which is good.
All right, so beyond the DBJ, beyond the budget,
yes,
what else do you think that the government can or should do to further support small businesses locally?
Yes, I believe definitely there needs to be an injection when it comes to working capital. And government has to find a different approach in order to support small business. In other words, what is happening? A number of, they have now given it to banks to on-lend to small businesses. When they on-lend, what they have done is to add on their interest rate. So when it leaves government, for instance, if government says to these AFIs, those are approved financial institutions, that are banks, for example, NCB, JMB, and so on. If government gives them at 2%, they now have to add on their interest, and then by the time it reaches small business, it's pretty high. Small business already have debts hanging over their heads. No, to add on this is just an additional cost. But what you need is grant funding. Grant funding, as you know, is not a payback. So this is really, I've always said, when you add the working capital, you will boost consumption. Because most, and I must add, when you look at the MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium, so micro is one of the largest sector within the MSME. Micro, it is defined as those businesses which turn over about 15 million per year. For the small, you have to turn over about 75 million per year, and the medium is 425 million. But think of it, there are a lot of businesses in Jamaica that we consider as large, they may be medium and small, because it's about $75 million per year, which is a small entity.
So I'm thinking now, and I'm trying to see if there are any ways that, well, let me just ask you.
Yes.
How can your organization, or small businesses rather, engage with the government and other stakeholders so that they can provide some kind of input and feedback mechanism in terms of budgetary decisions and how those might affect them?
I think we need more conversation, and we need a place at the table when government are making decisions, and it's going to be much easier. The thing about small businesses, which I think a lot of people don't understand, is that these are committed persons, especially those who want their independence and they want to say they're running their own businesses. What happened is that we provide 80% of employment within Jamaica. We have another 90% of compliance where taxes are concerned, and the coffers of the government is being impacted. And that is what people understand, that the GDP that moves this country. There's a buzzword saying that MSME is the engine of growth, and they are correct. Without you putting that infrastructure in place via a government, you will have failure within the economy. So, to address your point, we need more grant funding. And what happened, it automatically falls back into the economy, and you have the multiplier effect, and everybody get impacted by it.
All right. So yes, we have heard about the multiplier effect. We have seen the importance of small businesses and so on. But what's your stance? Sometimes I get the impression there's a lot of bureaucratic processes that we have to go through, a lot of things to hop over and jump. What do you think about those?
You're right, and that's where lobbying comes from. We're in my sector, because we have different branches throughout the island, and we get this type of feedback. For instance, the bureaucracy, as you rightly says. And for the lobbying, this is what the small businesses has done. You have doing business taxation. We actually lobbied for government to repeal that. That is gone. What happened? Small businesses are unable to compete for government contracts based on our size and actually our size of our money. So what we have done is to lobby on behalf of the MSME sector and say to government, give us a piece of the pie. And what has happened, we have got now 20% of all government contracts within. This is what the small business sector has done. So when we are hearing of the bureaucracies and all of that, we now go to government and says, break down some of the hurdles and the walls so we can actually get an easier showing into the
let me pause for 1 second. This is The Conversation. This is Kwame Thomas. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the conversation. I am having a discussion with Mr. Michael Leckie, the president of the Small Business Association of Jamaica. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Grant funding, subsidies, incentivization. Yes. Do you think these would be meaningful ways, even a tax holiday, to bolster this engine of growth that is the MSME?
I support it 1,000%. Why I do it? I look at the other economies. I look at India, the UK, United States, and Germany. And those economies are growing. And when you look at the support for small businesses via grants and all of the needs of the small businesses sector, you see that those economies are growing. Some persons might say on the downside of it, this is actually taxpayers' money. How do we guarantee it? But this is what I've always said. Look at these economies and why are they growing. To underpin all of that, when the last, from Rwanda, the president was here and he says, listen, what moved my economy was agriculture. What I did and support small businesses. So these are evidence that this is what the government needs to do to attract, to move, to grow the economy, and that's no other way.
All right, we've switched focus a little bit now.
Yes.
The minimum wage,
Right.
The new one has not yet taken effect.
Right.
So my question is, what is your organization's stance on the current level of the national minimum wage?
The current and not the new?
Current one, not the new one, the current one.
Well, for the current one, let's put it in perspective. What is happening now? The economy has not grown. We're at a recovery stage. How do I look at it? I look at pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and where we are now. So, where we are before, the economy wasn't really growing. And then we had the pandemic and now caused a derailment of that. What happened? Salary is one of the biggest costs to small businesses. What is happening now? During the pandemic, we had to lay off a number of workers, and most of the owners now have to get in and get dirty and actually have to do some of the work because they are unable to pay some of the salaries. So the salary is okay, but we're looking at a new, I know you didn't introduce that, but the new one, I know it's going to be a bit iffy and a bit problematic to some, if not most, small businesses. But
prior to the start of the pandemic, we might have argued that it was okay.
Yes.
The rate was okay. But admittedly, going through the pandemic and now coming out on this side of the pandemic, the $9,000+ is not worth the same. So the amount of things that you could have bought with that money, then you surely can't buy the same amount. No, it's less.
That's right.
And you're saying that it's okay for us to have stayed there with that minimum wage? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. What you see, there too, I have to defend the workers' right, and I also have to defend my constituents, which are the MSMEs. So we're looking at livable wage. We're looking at what it ought to be, and you're right. Inflation has eroded almost everything, and price. And what is happening now, what we have looked at, about 30 to 35% of our sale has gone down. And again, I'm emphasizing that we are in support of the new increase for all workers of a minimum wage, but it's going to be an impact of the small businesses and in terms of our bottom line.
All right. Tell me what are some of those positively and negatively of the new increase?
For what happened, what you'll do, you will have workers who are much happier, who you get more productivity, and what you have is workers can actually now come and not not what you would call be disgruntled at the workplace. Those are the three positive. On the downside now, it impacts on the small businesses, their bottom line, where their expenses have gone up. And consumers are buying less, so there goes your profit margin, which is pretty low.
But some persons can argue, though, that the profit margins are going down because, yes, persons are buying less, but they're buying less because they're not making as much.
Right.
And we could also look at the fact that there are a number of other things that you can consider shaving off. You know, for example, there are other overheads besides salaries that you might want to look at in terms of reducing those things. Isn't that a fair assessment to make?
It is fair, but like I tell you, there are different sectors within the MSME. Who are the greatest impact is the micro side of things. The corner shop, the man who does his small hustlings and so on. He has a different type of cost, meaning inflation hits him harder than everybody else. The medium size now, he has this fixed cost, rental, light, water. Because when I look at the micro size, he can get around it in an informal way, but the fixed cost, which is rental for the medium sized person, and so on, and all of the interest rates and so on, the loan that he has to pay, and salaries, which are pretty high. So that is a fact.
All right, so in light of what you have said, we want to see how both parties can emerge victorious. So my question is, what would be a meaningful or an appropriate level for minimum wage in order to balance the needs of the workers as well as the businesses?
You know, I support the new minimum wage of 13,000, and it only spells good for the workers, and you're gonna need your workers at all points. And I've said it earlier, productivity is key. So I am in support. I'm not hitting the new minimum wage at all.
So it's appropriate then, that's what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So how can the small businesses now ensure that they're able to pay their employees a fair wage while also remaining competitive in the market? Because competition is important. If you can't compete, you can't stay afloat.
Right. And what I've always said, and I said, listen, just look at the basic things. Look at your income, look at your expenditures, be more closer to it. Meaning, those who are going to pay, see if you can extend the payment period. Take a look at your inventory. Buy that is turning over rapidly. Do not stock those inventory which will take a longer time to turn over. It makes no sense. So take a look at those, narrow down on it, and see where you can shave those expenses so you can balance based on the wages. That is one of the key factors that will drive it.
All right, so now that it's just a matter of time before this new minimum wage takes effect.
In June 1st.
Yes, and we hear about Ghetto Kirk, for example, looking at the negatives of having a higher minimum wage because he's seen doom and gloom. He's seen where more persons would have to be laid off and all of those things. One, is that your outlook? Two, what policies or programs do you believe the government should implement now to support small businesses in meeting those obligations for a higher minimum wage?
There has to be, I'm going to repeat it, there has to be grant funding now. There have to be a pivoting into agriculture. This is now, we're talking about import substitution. Look at our import bill. Look what Jamaica can actually substitute for those that we are bringing in. Say, for instance, carrot. Let us pivot small business persons into that so they can be additional income. Look at the hotels. Look at their consumption. See where we can actually address those and we can supply the hotels for all their demands. So these are the things. There has to be grant funding, import substitution, and also where we can actually have the industry of the hotels, and we can actually address that. And that is going to be the key to move the small business. So government must look at it. In how they're gonna frame it, there are going to be 3 industries or 3 ministries that ought to be involved. The Ministry of Industry and Commerce, Ministry of Agriculture, and the Ministry of Education. How do I do this is the tripartite thrust. One, you now have to look at farming as a business. That's where now the educational part of the ministry comes in, the Ministry of Education. Industry and Commerce. Now, they already have the database of all the small businesses. We can actually support them on that. Then you look at agriculture. So these are the 3 things that, in my view, will help to frame and drive that concept.
All right. So you listed three primary ministries.
Yes.
Agriculture, education, and industry.
Yes.
Now, I'd asked about the doom and gloom. You know, I really want to find out what do you think, because here we have an actual wholesaler doing something, giving his take on it. Do you think that that take is accurate?
Like I'm not sure what the wholesaler has in mind.
So he's
I'm not
arguing,
sure what it is.
So his argument is that if you have an increased minimum wage,
yes,
means that increased salaries, you would have to be paying out more, and because you're paying out more, you might be forced to lay off more persons.
Yeah.
So it might actually have the opposite effect as opposed to what's intended.
I prefer to look. I prefer to look at the data and the information on that. I don't want to be off the cuff sort of a response, because if you look back, all the time Jamaica has been in any problems, whether there been natural disasters or the economic, we tend to push, and we tend to all the time we find a way out. So I don't believe in the doom and the gloom. Jamaicans are resilient. They always find a way to make it happen. And again, I think that wholesaler, just looking on the face of it, he may be thinking that, here is going to be the biggest downside of things. But we have to know, like I said, we need to pivot, and we have to move. Come from the concept or your mindset of being a tunnel vision and shift away from your core business. Add something in, and that employer think that you will lay off, maybe use in a different area, and that is where we ought to be looking.
All right, thank you very much for having this discussion with us. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Michael Leckie, the president of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, he just looked and he just spoke about the fact that we can, in fact, if we pivot, come out on the better side of this, and he is in agreement with the new changes as far as the minimum wage is concerned. So thank you very much. We ask that you join us next time for another riveting discussion right here on The Conversation. I'm Kwame.